Um, hey. Um, I think if you're looking to choose a religion, and I use that word religion unapologetically. It's not such a popular term nowadays, but I remember when religion fell out of vogue and you had to start using euphemisms like spiritual tradition and so on and so forth. And so I'm not participating in the shaming of the word religion or all sorts of stuff like that. If you're looking for a religion, you're looking to understand religion, if you're looking for a religion, there's kind of two ways you can go about it. One way is that you can look, and I think this is the best way to go about it, you can look at the ideas of a given tradition. And then you can compare them to the ideas of other traditions. The nice thing about that is it gets away from cultural prejudices and minor details being the deciding factors. Did you guys follow that? By looking at the ideas, then you're not looking at the trappings of the ideas. You're looking at the substance and not the form. You're looking at the message and not the medium that the message is communicated in. And that's good because sometimes bad things come in shiny packages. So if you were going to look at things ideologically, I think there's three basic concepts ontologically that you have to define, and then you look at the interactions of those. Those three concepts would be self, world, and God. Yeah, it's another word I'm not afraid of using either. Nowadays we say stuff like, the universe was reaching out to me, which indicates that the universe is conscious and has will and has incredible power because it's able to reach out to you through space and time and help you out. It's interested in helping you out, so it must be really good too. So you also need this all good, all powerful, all knowing divinity. But when you say the universe, it might seem more generic, but it's actually not. When you start to say the universe is trying to help me or put that in my path, you're acknowledging the omnipotence and the omniscience and the omnibenevolence of that divinity. And so you're really, like in a very strong way, defining the universe as a classical conception of divinity. Did you guys follow that one? It's almost better you just use the normal terminology. It's less deceptive to yourself. It's less self-deceptive. Self, world, God. Now, if you're an atheist, you can jettison which one of the three? You can jettison God, but you still have to deal with self and world. And if you want to argue that our consciousness is nothing more than electrical synapses going off in our brain, that's no small task. Consciousness has any number of features that you don't find in the chemical world, like free will and thoughts about things. And so, anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but René Descartes, one of the reasons why he came up with Cartesian dualism and separated the world into its phenomenal and its numinous aspects, body, mind, is because he wanted to do science and he couldn't figure out how to deal with all the mind stuff that was undeniably existent. So by separating it into two things, dichotomizing it, he could just leave this for a later date and focus on the world of stuff, which was really valuable during the Renaissance and with the scientific revolution. But the problem hasn't gone away. We still have the hard problem of consciousness. Why we're conscious. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? And that question has not been answered. If you know anything about philosophy of mind, you know that question has not been answered. It's a raging debate right now, as it has been for decades, ever since people picked it up again, after centuries of ignoring it. So even if you're an atheist, you got to come up with an idea of self and world. And if you're a spiritualist, that means you believe there's something beyond just the world in front of you. You're not a physicalist. And therefore you have to have some conception of divinity, which we can just call God. I mean, you have to use a very generic understanding of God because you have to then let people define God the way they want to. So ideologically, if you're looking for a tradition, then these are the three things you look at, and then you start to look at how they liaise and interact with one another. For instance, what is our relationship with the world? Now, if you have the worldview of 5 billion people, almost 2/3 of the planet, more than 2/3 of the planet, there's somewhere between 1.5 and 2 billion Muslims and 3+ billion Christians. So we're getting around the 2/3 mark if you take those two traditions together. If you look at their worldview, there's this basic idea of the world was created ex nihilo, from nothing. Therefore, the world is not intrinsically divine. The world is mammon. The world takes you away from divinity. Things of this world are antagonistic to your spiritual life. Adam and Eve messed up. You're paying for their crimes. So there's this idea that used to be in vogue, not so much anymore, that if you do something wrong, you could pass on your debts to your children. Used to be, you had a slave and you got in trouble and they were going to whip you, you just have them whip your slave instead. Or it used to be that you had to be sold into indentured servitude, you could just sell your child into indentured servitude and they could suffer your prison sentence on your behalf. We jettisoned this idea from like practically every legal system on the planet centuries ago. Although slavery was outlawed, the last country to outlaw slavery was Mauritania. You know when they did it? 2007. So although most of the world, even the idea of a mortgage means that the mort in mortgage means death. Mortuis. And so it means you have to pay it until you die. But we don't have any way in which you pass on your debts to your children. It's illegal. We figured that out. We also can't have people vicariously suffer for us. I mean, it seems like a bizarre idea, right? That you're going to get punished and so you have somebody else take the whippings for you. It seems ridiculous, right? That's Christianity, man. That's a core idea in the Nicene Creed. It's held by 99+% of Christians in the world. There's a few 100 million Christians maybe who don't believe that, or maybe a few million. But the vast majority, that's a core concept. Somebody else suffered for your crimes. So our relationship to the world if you believe that we're being punished because of a mistake made by our forefathers and foremothers who passed on their mistakes to us and infected us fundamentally, then our relationship with the world is an antagonistic one. And this gives rise to, like, people want to get martyred, or they want to die in a crusade, or a jihad. It gives rise to a whole thing called millenarianism, which is the people who can't wait for the world to end. They can't wait for the apocalypse. And that crops up. David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. Your neighbors. Or the Heaven's Gate cult down in San Diego. Those are good old or Jim Jones out in Guyana. I don't know how familiar you guys are with cult history. I'm into it. But these are millenarian cults. They've been around forever. They've been around for thousands of years. People who can't wait for the flood or the fire, for people to die, and then they usually end up doing some kind of mass suicide. I mean, you got Buddhist monks in Cambodia drinking mercury, killing themselves centuries ago. This stuff goes way back. There's a whole martyrdom fetish of early Christianity where everybody wanted to get crucified. What to speak of, I mean, why jump all the way back to that? Why not just look at jihad? It's like that's like a current affair. So, if you got the wrong idea about the nature of the world and your relationship to it, you come up with all these bizarre ideas. Like, take something as just spastic. Like the Salem witch trials, they didn't kill that many people. But you go back into the witch trials in Europe, they were, I mean, that was a big deal. They killed a lot of people. I read a recent, it's a fabulous piece of academic literature recently. It seems that the inquisitions and witch trials in Europe coincided perfectly with the Protestant Reformation. And churches wanted to see that they were really good at exorcising evil. And so they were competing, because once the Protestant Reformation happened, the Catholics didn't have a stranglehold, monopoly on people's religious persuasions. So the Catholics and the Protestants had to battle it out for who was more into exorcising demons and protecting their congregation. And there was a massive, massive surge in the witch trials during about a 150-year period where they were competing, and it was only in the places where, like places like England, it wasn't that big of a deal because everybody was Protestant. Places like Italy, everybody was Catholic, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it was in the battleground countries, like France, then they were really into it. Anyway, that's just an aside. But yeah, you look at something as spastic as killing witches. Well, if you had the worldview that everybody was going to go to hell eternally unless they believed in your version of Christianity. So everybody's going to hell forever. Like all you guys are going to hell forever. And you're going to burn on a lake of fire. Of course, if there is a lake of fire and you're going to burn there forever, that definitely means God's not all good. Because an all good God wouldn't create an eternal hell. So that's a problem. And now as you become like when you look at people who are arguing against dystheistic conceptions of divinity, dystheistic means evil conceptions of divinity. The standard academic canon fodder for dystheistic critiques is modern day Christianity and classical Christianity. That's what, when academics really want to have a field day and attack the impoverished, evil conceptions of God, their go-to is Christianity over the millennium. Because of the concept like an eternal hell that you go to after one lifetime for thought crimes. So anyway, you got this dystheistic deity who's sending you to hell forever. And you bought into that. And all you guys are going because you showed up at our temple. And you got one shot. If I can stomach it, and I can cause you guys immense pain right now, and the pain is enough that you renounce your pagan ways, then maybe you got a shot. You know, like my son Shekhar, who's now, 230 pounds and 6'3", at the age of 17. So who knows, like when that train's gonna stop, when that freight train's gonna slow down. He doesn't show any signs of slowing down yet, so who knows where he's gonna wind up. Who's 6'3" in the audience? It's like no joke. How tall are you? 6'3". Yeah, it's no joke. I feel small. I'm 6'1". I feel small around him. You got a short torso, long legs, right? You don't look that much taller than everybody. Yeah. But yeah, I believe you. I don't think you're lying to me. So you got long legs. It's movement arms and fulcrum points. There's 6'3", but there's how long your legs are, how short your torso is, determines whether you're a good squatter or a deadlifter. Sometimes you see two people sit next to each other. One of them's 5'10", the other one's 6'3", but if they sit next to each other on a bench, they look the same height. But then when they stand up, the femurs are a lot longer, and that makes a big difference. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. Shekhar was 2, and he got a stomach flu, and I did not want to take him to the hospital because he would have gotten freaked out, and it would have made him miserable, and his mother and I could take care of him. So we were really trying not to take him to the hospital. But a stomach flu is no joke. A stomach flu means anything you drink, like a bad stomach flu, anything you drink, you immediately vomit. It's like when you have to take Benadryl because your body is your immune system is on fire and it won't stop. So then anything you drink, anything you eat, immediately you vomit. So he's 2. And he's thirsty because he's just vomited a ton. He's totally dehydrated. When people die of dysentery or whatever it might be, they don't die of diarrhea, they die of dehydration. And so he's begging me, please, Daddy, please. So I give him a little sip of water and he'd yak again. So I called our pediatrician and he said, if you don't want to take him to the hospital and get a needle stuck in his arm and have him be there overnight to get some saline, you have to not give him a single drop of water for 4 hours. So my wife and I were like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're not giving you a drop of water. We're going to do it. And we lasted maybe half an hour. We gave him a little thimble full of water. Not an actual thimble. I don't have a thimble, but whatever. You get the idea. And he yacked. And then we're like, okay, God, we got to do it. So we sat there in the middle of the night with our son, crying to us, begging us to give him water for 4 hours. And then we were allowed to give him a teaspoon of water. Half an hour later, 2 teaspoons. Do you understand what a teaspoon is? It's nothing. 3 teaspoons make up a tablespoon. 16 tablespoons make up an 8-ounce cup. It's like a quarter of an ounce. It's tiny, tiny, little teeny weeny bits. And it took us 8-10 hours to get him back to where he could, drink a quarter cup of water or something like that. And he was crying, and we felt terrible. But we loved him enough that we suffered through it with him. So if you really love somebody, and you really believe they're going to go to hell forever for thought crimes, you could torture them. Not even evilly as a sadistic, horrible person, just as an incredibly misguided person. So the ideas about the nature of self and the nature of this world, they're significant. They determine the kind of life you lead and what you do with your time. The pagans had a much more body-positive conception of the world. They weren't the fat shamers of their time. It's funny, actually, if you look at art from the Renaissance period, you'll see that the women are all very buxom. Have you noticed that? It's not that all women were fat during that time, but that was considered to be beautiful. In India, even nowadays, I mean, there's a whole reason for it, but in India nowadays, if somebody's very fat, you say to them, what do you say? Raj Kumud? How do you describe a very, very fat person? What's the word? Say it loud. Come on, don't be shy. Don't doubt yourself. Stop doubting yourself. You're Indian. What do you say? You say they're healthy. Oh, you're looking very healthy. You're looking very healthy means you're obese. If you got a six-pack in India, it means you're like a hard laborer on the streets, toiling away. If you're morbidly obese, it means that you're wealthy and you have enough food to eat, and you are described as, oh, he's looking very healthy. It's crazy, right? Because they're not looking healthy. You were doubting, you knew the word, but you were doubting yourself, right? Anyway, so I don't know how I got into fat women. Oh, the pagans. Pagans had a much more body positive, world positive view. The world was created by divinity, and therefore everything was innately divine. And therefore when you look at the world, you start to get some stimuli to inspire you towards divinity. And the world doesn't take you away from the divine, it actually brings you closer to the divine. You follow this? I mean, here's one for you. The dreaded patriarchy. I don't know how the feminists got that term and made it their own. But the patriarchy is automatically synonymous with everything evil. It happened practically in my lifetime, but they got the great term. Like homophobia, best term ever. That's probably some of the best public relations work done by the gay community, out of any advertising campaign ever. Because if you're bigoted against gay people, what are you? You're a homophobe. You're scared of them. So you get a macho person who doesn't want to be scared of anything, and then if they show any bigotry towards gay people whatsoever, you get to call them a homophobe. Do you follow this? Super clever. Anyway, if you look at the patriarchy, which essentially has patriarchy. Arche means order. Patriarchy from patri means a patrilineal, a system of passing things on from father to son. Just like you have a matrilineal system, matriarchy within Judaism. But if you look at patriarchies, which are sort of synonymous with hatred of women and misogyny. What's the word for hatred of men? How'd you know that? Did you hear that from me? Did you hear that from me?
No.
Okay. Good human. I won't say good man. Misandry. We don't even nobody even knows that term because we only hear the one side of it. We don't hear the other side of it. So if you look at when we think of patriarchies and all the evil abuse of women and so on and so forth, you can trace a lot of that back to a basic hatred of women because men are sexually attracted to women, in general, heterosexual men are attracted to women, which covers 95% of the population. But they get taught that things of this world are automatically bad, therefore sex is bad, therefore priests should be celibate. And so, but they are attracted to women, and therefore they hate the women because they're attracted to them. And they see women as being evil and of the devil and of Satan, and so much abuse comes from that. Did you guys follow that? I'm going to go a step further because I like to get edgy like that. I would suspect that many men in this room on some level hate women. Because you're programmed like that, either by the men in your life or the women in your life who disappointed you. Either the men taught you how to do it because they inherited as kind of fruit of the poison tree. They inherited that from their forefathers somewhere. Or you have bad experiences with women, and then there was enough of this floating around where you could glom onto it. I don't even think it's just, we met the enemy and he is us. It's like pogo. It's not just the others, us versus them, those damn misogynists out there and those bigoted people out there. I think it's right in your own heart. And a lot of that comes from just, like an inability to deal with attraction and aversion and the consequences of that, and the embarrassment that comes along with it sometimes. You get rejected, you don't get validated, and so it twists. Like, I got 2 daughters. One of them's too young for me to have to deal with this, but my other daughter, I tell her when she wants to shut men down, don't be too brutal. You're going to shut a guy down, be definitive, but don't be brutal. You know why you don't want to be brutal when you shut a guy down?
He could become aggressive too.
They might get violent. It's like an art and a science. You're going to shut people down definitively if they're making a move on you and you're not into it. But if it's too humiliating, sometimes that brings out the worst in people. We should live in a world where we don't have to fear that, right? Super into that. As soon as we live in that world, I won't teach my daughter to be careful. Till then, I want to protect her from this side and also arm her to protect herself from the other side in case I'm not around someday. Anyway, the pagan worldview that everything was divine, everything was connected to divinity, that conception of world came up with a very different understanding of your place in the world, how you can relate to the world successfully. Do you guys follow this? Krishna, interesting in the Gita, Krishna has such a world positive view. He says that he's desire. Which is in congruence with Dharma. Kamosmi, I am desire. When Krishna's trying to help you understand where you can find, in fact, the word Krishna means the all-attractive one. Anyway, the other way to look at traditions is you look at where they come from. And so then you would look at Hinduism versus Judaism. You look at the texts they hold sacred, and you look at the history of those traditions and where they come from. The problem with that is sometimes you end up with trappings, and it could be that 2 traditions from totally distinct places in the world might have a whole lot in common, and neighbors might have a lot that's not in common. Like Hinduism was largely a Western Indologist attempt to fit Indian spirituality into the same kind of box they could easily fit the Middle Eastern traditions they were familiar with into. Christianity is largely uniform. The Nicene Creed is fairly standard for 99% of Christians. And Judaism also is fairly uniform as well. Middle Eastern traditions, fairly uniform. It's because you got this exclusivism. It's a foreboding place in the world with Bedouin tribes, and you're either with us or against us, and the landscape is very antagonistic towards human survival. And so you get these tribes surrounding water sources, and those water sources are few and far between, and they do battle with other tribes, and it's very exclusivistic, and you're either with us or against us, and it's very tribal, and therefore they tended towards religious exclusivism. And so you have Jews and Goyim, Christians and heathens, Muslims and infidels, and you're either in our tribe or you're outside of our tribe. You can contrast that to Eastern spirituality, which was largely inclusivistic, although hierarchical. And so you get with Buddhism and Hinduism, in that section of the world, that you never really hated anybody or cast anybody out or said that they weren't part of the family. You would just say, we're better than you for this or that reason. But there was no indigenous slavery in India in its multi-thousand-year history. You know, slaves in India were imported by the Muslims, who ruled India with an iron fist for a millennia and killed 100 million Hindus over a 1,000-year reign. Biggest genocide in the history of the world. It's Pol Pot with his 3 million, Hitler with his 12, Stalin with his 20, and Mao with his 40, and then some. But in that part of the world, there were these great civilizations, Chinese civilization, Cambodian civilization, the Khmer civilization, not the modern day Khmer Rouge, but the original Khmer society of Cambodia, which is the home to the largest Vishnu temple in the world, Angkor Wat. Did you know that? The largest Vishnu temple in the world is in Cambodia. Vaishnavism spread that far. And that was ruled the whole Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. It was all kind of ruled by the same empire. So they were inclusivistic. They figured out a way to get along and appreciate people. So the other way to look at traditions is to look at where they come from and where they grew out of and the history of the place. I prefer not to do that, not because there's not value in it. Thank you very much for coming by. Thank you so much. I prefer not to do that because although it can teach you a lot, I don't like to just look at societal and geographical elements of a tradition. I like to try to take traditions seriously and find out what they believe, and not just assume that everything they believe comes from some sort of sociological need. It's sort of denigrating. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, a Jewish psychiatrist, this was a couple of years ago, and we were debating. He was trying to affront to me that they created life from chemicals, and I was just laughing at him outright. And we were engaged in a little bit of verbal fisticuffs on Christmas at my parents' house, because he had nothing better to do at Christmas than come over to my parents' house. And so we were arguing, and he was saying, I got nothing against religion. I guess it brings people together for a common cause, and it helps create order in society, and gives people something to do. I found that to be incredibly denigrating, because it just assumes that there's nothing actually spiritual about my tradition. There's no spiritual truth, just because it can be completely explained and its benefits are completely anthropological and completely societal and completely sociological, and it has no actual innate, there's not a higher truth. Did you follow that? That's the problem with the anthropological study of religion, which again is why I like to look at ideas instead of where something comes from. And my response to him was, so you're a fan of the Nazis too, right? Because that was an idea that got people together and motivated them and helped organize society, and you're saying there's good in that, right? So I like to not, at the outset, assume there's no truth to somebody's perspective. Did you follow this? All right. So, looking at ideas. If you want to understand the Hare Krishna movement, one of the easiest ways to understand the Hare Krishna movement is to look at our primary spiritual practice. This isn't always the case. Sometimes you got you got the Pope with his funny hat and his jeweled slippers and so much stuff going on. If you look at the trappings and some of the rituals, you don't get a sense of the core ideas of Nicene Creed. The ritual got pretty elaborate, and it's hard to trace out its connection to the philosophy. But in our tradition, it's relatively easy to understand what we're about if you look at our primary practice. What's our primary practice? We chant Hare Krishna. We're called Hare Krishnas because that's such a all-pervasive feature of what we do. We got named after it. Like the redcoats are called redcoats because they wore red coats, and they weren't called British soldiers. They were called redcoats because it was just an easy way to refer to them. So we're called Hare Krishnas because we're walking around chanting Hare Krishna all the time. And like, you Hare Krishnas. Interestingly, within Hinduism, our tradition isn't called Hare Krishna, it's called Gaudiya Vaishnava. So, there's three major strains of Hinduism: Shakta, Shaiva, and Vaishnava. The Vaishnava is by far the largest strain of Hinduism. It means worshippers of Vishnu or Krishna. You want to stand up? Or sit in that chair behind you? You sure? Okay. If I'm talking, I'm in a chair, so I'm not going to get antsy. But when I'm on the floor, I get antsy. If you guys want to stand up, you're welcome to. In fact, why don't we just stand up for a second? Let's just stand up and stretch our legs for a second. All right, potty break is up. Sit back down. There's three major strains: Shakta, Shaiva, and Vaishnava. Vaishnava is by far the largest. 78% of the world's Hindus are Vaishnava, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica Book of the Year a couple of years ago, last time I checked. There's two other strains, Shaiva and Shakta. The Shaktas worship the feminine. The Shaivas worship Shiva. So feminists are like, oh, I'm into the Shakta thing. Not so fast. Because the Vaishnavas also worship the feminine, A. And there's a really important idea that you got to wrap your head around when you're making a decision on, which of these strains you most identify with. Two of the three strains are impersonalists. They're Kevaladvaitins. They believe in a pure monism. They believe that I am you, you are me, we are synonymous with the world, and you literally are God. And any variety or any individuality or any distinction whatsoever in the universe is illusory. And the goal of life is to become homogenized and merge and become absolutely one with all reality. Which sounds cool, especially if you've had a traumatic experience as an individual. Giving up your individuality might sound really sexy and attractive. But you got to do the math and realize that means you also give up the ability to love. Because love unifies people, but it's based on a backdrop of difference. You also have to give compassion, empathy, intimacy. All these things are based on some degree of individuality and relating to other individuals. And so if you get rid of all individuality, you'd also get rid of all distinct thoughts. Such as that loving feeling. In the song, You've Lost That Loving Feeling, now it's gone, gone, gone. That happens to the monists. Even the thought of love, that is a variety of feeling in a conscious individual. Love is an attribute of a person. We don't find love floating around like carbon. It's always a byproduct of consciousness. Did you guys follow this? So, two of the schools, the Shaivas and the Shaktas, have this insuperable problem that they believe the goal is for everything to become one, but they have no explanation for how that one became many in the first place. Certainly the variety must be intrinsic to the absolute for this world, filled with color and sight and sound to exist. Sometimes they get really fancy and they say, this world doesn't actually exist, it's all just an illusion. Do you guys follow that? The problem with that is, number one, that's a pretty big stretch to ask somebody to believe that everything they've ever experienced doesn't exist. It's like it's difficult as a brain in a vat theory. But it's got an even bigger problem. Even if the illusion of variety exists, that still itself is a variety within the one. So even the rising up of variety within the one, the illusion of variety within the one, itself is a type of variety, and therefore you've gone against your pure monism. You guys follow this? Hopefully I didn't lose you. If I did, tough luck. I'm on the clock. I'm doing my best. And these ideas take a little time. We got to do them a few times. Got to go a couple of rounds. I'm not trying to get you guys everything dialed in perfectly. We're just doing a broad pass over topics. The Vaishnava school is the worship in love of a loving, compassionate, all-good, all-powerful divinity. And at least in our tradition, it has both masculine and feminine aspects, which might sound anthropological until you think about how ubiquitous masculinity and femininity are in the world, and they're there even down to plants, what to speak of in all species. And so if we want to look at this world and get a sense of what's up top and where we came from, we look at ourselves. That's the only way we can do it. And when we look at this world, we find that masculine and feminine are all pervasive, universal features of reality. And so there's no reason to suspect they might not also be there in the divine. So, when you have a conception of God as being all good and all powerful and all knowing, and you really work that out. You don't just say, and we believe in eternal hell, and never bother to bring those two ideas into conversation with one another to find out that all, like a hell, can't coexist with an all-good, all-powerful deity. You guys remembering this? When you take a look at the ramifications of believing in an all-good, all-powerful, all-loving deity, all-knowing deity, and you look at the things that you can't believe in anymore, like torturing people forever for thought crimes. At some point, you come up with the idea, and this happens all over the world, actually. You come up with the idea, I don't even need to ask God for anything. There's all sorts of theisms around. There's animism. You see a big mountain, and so you worship the mountain or a tree or something like that. It's the beginning of spirituality, usually in the pre-philosophical phase of a culture. Then you got deism, the idea there might be a deity, but it has no relationship to this world. Or sometimes in later days, deism was the belief that you could logically arrive at God through natural theology, through looking at the world carefully. In that sense, I'm a deist. I believe that God is perfectly logical and reasonable, and also goes beyond logic. Actually, the Christians believe this. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was Theos. In the book of John, in Greek, it says in the beginning was Logos, and Logos was Theos. In the beginning was logic, and logic was God. They believed in a logical deity as well. At least the people who put together John did. And then you've got, theism, the belief in some divine source. Then that breaks off into polytheism, the worship of many gods, and henotheism. You guys know what henotheism is? There's many gods, but you just worship one. Henos means of the one. So there's many gods. It's a polytheistic world, but you just worship one God. Then there's monolatry. You guys know what monolatry is? There's many gods, but only one of them deserves worship. So it's not that you arbitrarily picked one, but there's only one that deserves worship. Then monotheism, there's only one God. Judaism is really the rise of monotheism in a polytheistic milieu, namely Babylon and Egypt. They came up with this nifty idea that there was one ring to rule them all, and they had to fight against the polytheistic people that were around, and they grew out of that. In a lot of ways, our tradition is the same. We believe in one supreme source of everything. And then if you get into like a monotheistic conception, one source of everything, then what's the nature of that? Is it all good? Is it all loving? Is it all powerful? Et cetera, et cetera. You start to ask these questions, and you start to think about what are the ramifications of those questions. Without going through a big long process trying to get us there logically, if you get to the point of believing in an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing deity, at some point you stop ever asking for anything. And this give us this day our daily bread, you just can't say it anymore. It doesn't work. That's in the New Testament. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, etc., etc. At some point you realize you can't ask for them. The Christians figured this out. If you look at medieval Christian spirituality, especially amongst the ascetics, if you look at the Philokalia, and you notice there's something called the Jesus Prayer. You guys know what the Jesus Prayer is? They stopped saying the Lord's Prayer and they started saying, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on the sinner. And then eventually they shortened it even further. Jesus Christ, have mercy on the sinner. They would just repeat that over and over again in Japa. They would lock themselves up in catacombs, underground cells. They would voluntarily enter. Food would pass through them. They have a little rivulet where they would defecate and pass urine that would run out. And they would spend their lives chanting Japa every day, chanting, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on the sinner, or Jesus Christ, have mercy on the sinner, over and over and over again on a rosary. Did you know that? The whole movement of this. If you go under Rome, you'll find catacombs, also in Paris, where these people lived. Sometimes they put their skulls together into like funny, cool little shapes. Have you ever seen those mountains of skulls? Those are Christian monks who voluntarily went down there to chant the name of God forever. St. Gregory in the 12th century, he was a monk on an island called Mount Athos. It's a sovereign island in the Aegean Sea off the coast of Greece, where women aren't allowed. Again, that's the hatred of women. It's only Orthodox male monks who are allowed to live there. And so St. Gregory lived there in the 12th century. And even Hitler, when he invaded Greece, and Mussolini, they left Mount Athos alone. It's an anchor point for Orthodox Christianity. St. Gregory said, we chant the name of God because Jesus told us to pray ceaselessly, but we run out of things to say. So we just repeat the name of God over and over again as the perfect prayer. That's a 12th century Christian who said that. It could have been written by one of our saints. At some point, you stop asking for things and you stop chanting mantras. Like we say it's the Maha Mantra, the great mantra. It's actually not. It's Nam Kirtan. When we chant Hare Krishna, we're doing Nam Kirtan. We're just saying the name of Krishna over and over again. So even the words Hare Krishna and Rama, those three words, there's no verbiage in between them. My dear Lord, please do this for me or please do that for me. We just say the name of God and we don't ask for anything. Why? Because Krishna knows what you need. If God's really all good and all powerful, what do you need to ask for? Chanting Hare Krishna is really just saying, oh my friend, over and over again. Prabhupada said that one time. Somebody asked Prabhupada to translate Hare Krishna, and Prabhupada said, oh my friend, oh my friend. We're calling out. The words actually decline. Declension is something you do with nouns. You turn a noun into a preposition by changing the suffix. We do this with verbs. You have to swim as the infinitive, and then you swam as the past tense, and I am swimming, etc., etc. So that's, all of us are familiar with conjugating verbs. Como está, como estás, como están, como estamos, etc. But you can also do the same thing with nouns. It's called declension. And so all the words in the Hare Krishna mantra are declined in what's called the vocative. The vocative in grammar is when you're trying to get somebody's attention and you call out to them at a great distance. And so Hare Krishna is O Hara, O Hari, O Krishna, O Rama. You're crying, O Krishna, Krishna. So what do? We cry out the name of the divine with confidence. And we don't ask for anything. It's even more stripped down than the Jesus prayer. There's no have mercy on the sinner. We cut that out. We just repeat the name of God as the perfect prayer. That ritual comes from an idea about the nature of the world, the nature of divinity, that God's ever present, that God's everywhere, that this world isn't such a bad place. That you can always connect with divinity. And all good God would want you all always be able to connect with him and her. And all powerful God could make that a reality. And that's the bhakti movement. breaking all gender barriers, breaking all social barriers, breaking all caste barriers, spiritual communism, egalitarianism. Everybody can become a saint. You know, every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. You know who said that? Gandhi said that. No, he didn't. Oscar Wilde said that. So that comes from. And so how do we do it? We do it in public, all together. We chant together. Some people, I like doing kirtan because I feel like together. Yeah, you could go square dancing and feel together with us too. Oh, calms my mind. Well, try some deep breathing. Or try benzos. They also work. Calm your mind down. You follow? Well, I feel happy. Oh, well, so go have an orgasm. You'll feel happy too. Get a big oxytocin hit. That's like a real easy way to get oxytocin hit. So although people do feel camaraderie and they feel joyous and they feel calm and it helps them to quiet their minds, although those are all benefits of chanting Hare Krishna, and sometimes we even advertise them, there's really one major benefit. You commune with divinity. You get to see Krishna. Kali Kali Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar. In the Kali Yuga, Krishna incarnates as his name. Nama Hoite Hoya Saba Jagata Nistar. And by chanting that name, you will transcend everything. The real fruit is Krishna dances on your tongue. Radha and Krishna dance on your tongue when you chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada said that as well. That's our tradition. In a nutshell. We believe in an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing divinity. Therefore, stop asking for material stuff. The purpose of human life and all life is to cultivate love for divinity. Krishna's the all-attractive one. You can fall in love with God. You don't have to hate the world. Krishna's all-attractive. Doors open. It's always been open. Always will be open. Krishna's available for the price of a song to anybody, anywhere, at any time. If you have another religion and you teach these same ideas, but you chant, let us radish, let us radish, 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 let us lettuce, let us kale, 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 let us instead, then I would say, good on you. No problem. I'm good. Of course, I would wonder why you borrowed our entire tradition and then were egotistical enough that you felt you had to just change one element of it. I'd worry about that. Because that would indicate you had like a major self-esteem problem and it turned into narcissism. And you were lacking gratitude, which is going to really come back to haunt you. But if another tradition did come up with these same ideas and just had a different name of God that they chanted, that's great. They're our family. We love them. We value them. It's not a sectarian idea. It's not an exclusivistic idea. It's not an arbitrarily my way is better than your way idea. It's the consequence of looking at the ideas and fleshing it out and working through it. Bhakti is a cross-cultural phenomenon. It's what happens when somebody starts believing in an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing divinity. And we do it together, and when we do it together, it really uplifts you because the love of all the people around you becomes yours and you can touch the sky. You can stand on the shoulders of giants, see much further than you'd see normally. That's why devotees have amazing experiences in kirtan. Sometimes they think it's themselves. That's a problem. And sometimes you realize what's really happening is that the people you're with have so much devotion and so much communion with divinity, and you get to borrow theirs and make it your own. And you're basking in their light. And then we take it home and we got to own it ourselves, and that's japa when we chant on our own. And we count it because we value it. And when you value stuff, you count it. When you really value something, You watch it. And so we make a couple hours a day, and we own. It's funny, we don't take a vow to do kirtan every day. We take a vow to chant japa every day. It's obviously infinitely more important, because you got to own it yourself, fly your own plane. And this japa, properly chanted, is kirtan, as much as when we play musical instruments and all chant together. If you're attracted too much to the music, you're blowing it. You want to get good at the music, but you don't want it to be about the music. So we don't do folk music. If you look at Qawwali music, it's Hindu, Muslim, Mughal period, Sufi, devotional music, romantic music from Western India, the Sindh area, Pakistan, Afghanistan. They also play two-headed drums, and they're really good. They're actually better than we are in a lot of ways at doing kirtan. But they do like crazy harmonium playing. They'll do solos and stuff like that. We never do solos. We're not into solos. You know why? Because we never want to take the focus off the name of God. If somebody's tone deaf, but they have a lot of devotion, we want them to chant. If the mridanga players get too lusty and start beating the drum like some kind of masturbatory fantasy to show the world how cool they are, we don't appreciate it. We take the sound of Krishna's name very seriously. We never want the name to fall by the wayside. Even in our musical expression, we never drop the name. It's always there. It's always primary. And you get really good musicians so that they can really nicely display Krishna's name. We, in our temples we have deities, we dress the deities. We dress the deities because Krishna is Bhushan and Bhushan. He makes the clothes look beautiful. Krishna is the most beautiful. We don't want to obfuscate Krishna's form with the clothes. Sometimes we'll even hang the clothes kind of off the body so you can see Krishna's form, because we don't want the clothes to obfuscate the deity who's the most beautiful. So our kirtan style is about showcasing the name. It's distinct. It's not folk music. Other traditions, the Shakta and the Shakti, they have folk music. No one does kirtan except for the Vaishnavas. We've been doing it for a millennium. Nobody else does it. Neo-Hindus have now borrowed our idea, and then they chant like ma, 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 or something like that, or Kali, 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 or something like that. But they never used to do that. You look at their sacred texts, they never did that. That's a Neo-Hindu phenomenon where they borrowed our stuff because it was cool, but it's not actually there in their core tradition. It's not in their texts. It's not their tradition. Because the Kali concept is you eventually become Kali. Therefore, devotion is transient. It's something you do for a minute until you realize your divinity. It's devotion in practice, but it's not devotion in perfection. Our tradition values love and a loving connection with divinity in perpetuity, and therefore we have a ritual which embodies that. Here's how important this is to us. In our two main temples in the world, which are located in Mayapur and Vrindavan, kirtan goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In Mayapur, it's been going on for 50 years. In our temple, at our main world headquarters in Mayapur, Prabhupada instituted it. There's a team of devotees. They live there. And their only service as priests, is to go and chant kirtan in the original hut that we first got. We now have a massive campus. It's hundreds, thousands of acres. It's like we're building the largest religious structure, I think, in all of India. And it's huge. But there's a little grass hut where it all started. It was the first place we got. And that grass hut is still there, and devotees go in there, and they sit and they do kirtan 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter what's going on. Floods are going on, they're in boats. I'm not joking, I'm actually serious. They take boats and they go there and they do kirtan in boats during the floods. West Bengal has a floodplain, so it floods every year, or every other year it floods. They'll sit in boats and do kirtan. I'm not being hyperbolic. They actually do that. That's how important it is for us. Then about 35 years ago, Vrindavan is another place. It's another major sanctum sanctorum for us. And there was a great devotee, his name was Ayendra Prabhu, and he passed away in 2010. It's his 68th birthday today. That's his picture. He lived in Vrindavan since 1986, 85, 86. He lived about 25 years straight. And he decided to dedicate his life to doing kirtan 24 hours a day in Vrindavan. And so he was already an unbelievable kirtaniya, unbelievable kirtan leader. And he moved there, and because he was incredibly charismatic, he was also a celibate monk, saintly person, gave his whole life to Krishna from the mid-70s, lived in New York for a number of years, and used to go out on the back of a flatbed truck and do kirtan all over New York City. So he had a long love affair with kirtan. But he moved to Vrindavan, and he started 24-hour kirtan. And in the beginning, he was chanting 8-10 hours a day. But gradually, he collected a bunch of people around him, and they came and they lived in Vrindavan, sometimes for a few months or for a few years or for longer. Vrindavan lived there for a number of years, was Ayendra Prabhu's mridanga player. And they would do kirtan. They had that crew of people, and they lived there. A crew of 20 men. Sometimes it was 30, sometimes it was 10. And they would just take shifts. And for the last 35 years, just like for 50 years we have it going on in Mayapur, for the last 35 years, kirtan goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in our main temple. That's my timer. She's trying to nudge me not so gently. So it's his birthday today. And so we want to honor him. But we don't want to get all culty about it, so we didn't want to do anything, make too big of a deal about it. But we did want to talk about what he dedicated his life to. It's kind of what we've all dedicated our lives to. And what we're trying to do. And so we think the real thing is to chant 24 hours a day in your heart, to always be reaching out to Krishna in ecstatic love. For your life to be one long, beautiful conversation with Krishna. And all of our other rituals are just meant to support that. And when we chant japa, you are communing with divinity. And when you do kirtan, we're collectively communing with divinity. And this is such a big deal to us that we do akhand kirtan in all of our major temples. We do 24-hour days, 7-day-a-week kirtan. And our two main temples, it's been going on for 35 and 50 years. And the 35-year one is this wonderful Vaishnav's credit. He passed away in Vrindavan, like kirtan the day before he passed away. We believe that even in heaven you do kirtan. We do it in this world, we do it in that world. Because what is kirtan? It's the spontaneous, ecstatic, loving, selfless, reaching out to commune with divinity without asking for anything. And when you look at Hinduism, ideologically, and you look at all different strains, they've all got these prayers where they're asking for something. You don't know because you don't know the language. But if you learn the language and you look at it, they're always asking for something. And there's a flaw with that. If you really get it right, you understand how good Krishna is, how good God is, how powerful God is, you know you don't need to ask for anything anymore. One of the things Ayendra Prabhu was famous for was being fearless. Actually, his guru, Srila Prabhupada, his name was Abhay, which means fearless. Abhay Charan. Charan means feet. One who's fearless because they sit at the feet of the divine. They have that confidence. Like a child who cries out for their mother. They have confidence because they know their mother will take care of them. We want to become simple like that. And so we practice that simplicity, and it's reflected in our ritual. We try to break it down to its barest essence, And that's what we've been doing for millennia, and that's still what we're doing. In Long Beach, in India, 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now, that's our tradition in a nutshell. And we can put that into practice. We're going to do a kirtan right now, and we're going to put it into practice. Thank you very much. Haribol.